So, there has been a lot of action throughout the NHL today. A huge 8-7 victory for the Ottawa Senators against the LA Kings. Other games, like the Utah Hockey Club losing their first one ever. Florida took on the Boston Bruins. There's a lot to go on here, and maybe I'm just kind of saying this to recalibrate myself for the FOMO I have in terms of me not watching any of these games and not getting up-to-date fantasy hockey results. But instead of going over those games, because I quite frankly didn't watch them, I wanted to talk about the Edmonton Oilers. In particular, the Oilers and the Toronto Maple Leafs, because earlier yesterday there was a post made on thescore.com by Josh Wegman that talks about the idea of a potential trade that could go down between both of these teams, and it's a trade that I actually think could do very good things for both of these teams. Take a look at this. 5 trade destinations for Maple Leafs defenseman Timothy Liljegren. Now, Liljegren is a name that I think many fans, Leafs fans or otherwise, are familiar with because he has been one of these guys whose name has circulated around the trade block for a good chunk of the past few months. He's a guy that was drafted by Toronto back in 2017, right-handed defenseman, and for the most part he is a stable shutdown guy, or at least he's supposed to be. Liljegren has had a pretty difficult time fully establishing himself on the Toronto Maple Leafs roster this year. He's making $3 million till the end of 25-26 at 25 years old, so he's like kind of in the prime age of his career, and after coming off of 3 50-plus game seasons with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he hasn't played a game yet in 2024-2025. He was never really going to be a big point producer, but he still had 20 points each in these years. Last season he had 23 points in 55 games played. That being said, he hasn't played yet, the Maple Leafs have not found a way to use him, and reports are going out there saying that the Maple Leafs are gauging the trade market for defenseman Timothy Liljegren, who is a healthy scratch in each of the team's first 3 games to open the season. This is what Wegman goes out there and continues with. Liljegren has fallen out of favor with new coach Craig Berube, losing his spot on the blue line to Connor Timmins, a frequent scratch under previous bench boss Sheldon Keefe. The Maple Leafs also have another right-shot defenseman in Joni Hakanpää, who will come off LTIR at some point this season, leaving even less room for Liljegren on the roster. He does have some appeal, though. The 2017 first-round pick is still only 25 years old, and right-shot defensemen are usually in higher demand around the league. He's played 183 games over the last 3 seasons, averaging 17.56 per contest, and the Leafs have controlled 56.4% of 5-on-5 expected goals and 57.8% of the actual goals, with Liljegren on the ice in that span. This is where Wegman goes out there and writes about destinations. And of course, you can tell by the Canadian teams in the title and the thumbnail that I wanted to go out there and talk about the second team listed here in this article. It is the Edmonton Oilers. This is what Wegman writes. The Oilers desperately need a suitable partner for Darnell Nurse on the number 2 pairing. Broberg, Ceci, and Desharnais took turns a year ago, but all 3 are gone now. Edmonton tried newcomers Ty Emberson and Travis Dermott in that spot in their first 2 games, and the results were poor. 44.7% expected 5-on-5 goals share with Dermott, 30.4% with Emberson. Now, before we continue on, wow, those are some terrible results. 44.7% is already, bad. Anything under 50% is negative after all. But 30.4%? Goodness gracious, Ty Emberson and Darnell Nurse are not a good pairing. Ay. Who would have expected this, eh? Cheaping out on D causes the team to have bad D. Of course, no disrespect to Travis Dermott either, but still, his results were not great. If you go over to dailyfaceoff.com and their line combinations, you'll see that Ty Emberson was indeed taken out of the lineup and Troy Stecher was placed in yesterday's matchup instead. However, the Oilers still lost to the Calgary Flames. We did talk about that in the video after all. But that right side falls off significantly after Evan Bouchard. Sorry, but Dermott and Stecher are just not it in order to help a cup-contending team be a cup-contending team. This is where the article writes, a $9.25 million defenseman like Nurse should be able to elevate a lesser partner, but that just isn't the case. And while Liljegren is not a proven number 4 blue liner, he'd certainly be an upgrade over Dermott or Emberson. The Oilers only have about $1 million in cap space, so they'd have to create room, but if the losses keep piling on and finding a fitting partner for Nurse doesn't emerge, Liljegren could be an option. So let's talk about money first and foremost. There would need to be some sort of a salary cap relief here for this to go through. $3 million is not really too cheap after all. And for a guy like Liljegren, who was more so of a bottom pairing guy, I don't want to say like he's a depth defenseman. I feel more so safe in saying that he's like a number 5, number 4 tweener. He could play top 4 if he really pushed it. I mean, he was averaging almost 18 minutes of time on ice per game for his entire career up to this point, all with Toronto. That's not that bad. So for Timothy Liljegren, obviously, there's value there, there's skill there, there's an ability to headman the puck, and there's an ability to play shutdown defensive hockey that is there. And for the Edmonton Oilers, he would certainly leapfrog both Dermott and Stetcher on the right side. Not to mention Ty Emberson, whom San Jose Sharks fans were actually really disappointed to see him leave in that Cody Ceci trade. It's just kind of funny how everything falls into place here where Emberson was supposed to take over a top 4 role. There were supposed to be guys to stabilize that back end with the departures of Ceci, Desharnais, and Broberg, but unfortunately, the Oilers' defense has just gotten worse from last year. Sure, their forwards might have gotten a bit better. Jeff Skinner is a great ad, Arvidsson, great ad, but wowzers, they lost out on a lot of depth here. Timothy Liljegren, as a guy who is not getting his opportunity in Toronto, I think is maybe the best candidate to fill in a spot here, especially if you're able to convince Toronto, if you're able to, that is, it's probably not going to happen, but if you're able to convince them to retain salary, make this a little bit easier for Edmonton, then who knows what kind of possibilities are there. The Toronto Maple Leafs could get themselves some really good players, too, if they really wanted to force their hand and say, hey, we need roster players, we need to make our squad better in order for this trade to go through. But at the end of the day, you know, both of these teams are cup-contending favorites, and it would be difficult to find any legitimate roster additions that would be easily swapped between the two, unless one team is already not using them. I don't see Toronto being interested in prospects after all, and because Edmonton's team is already so thin after you get past the top 6 and after you get past the top 3 defensemen pretty much, it becomes really difficult to figure out what a trade could look like between these two organizations. I mean, the Oilers are not trading away any of their top 6 forwards. They have such little versatility in the bottom 6, so there isn't really much room for things to work. I feel like the Maple Leafs would get a much better trade opportunity if they traded Liljegren to a team that's trying to get a bit younger whilst still remaining competitive at this moment. Like, I don't know, there are some other teams written about here in the article that aren't as good, quote-unquote, or as supposed to be good, as the Edmonton Oilers. And these teams, I'd feel, would be able to sacrifice a little bit of talent today in order to get younger and get a guy like Liljegren who is only 25 and who can still get a little bit better as his career goes on. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're an Oilers fan or a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, how do you feel about the idea of Liljegren getting sent over from Toronto to Edmonton? Does this fix everything that the Edmonton Oilers are looking to fix? Is he the guy to make things work? If it's not Liljegren, who is it instead? If a trade does go down, what do you think the return could be? What do you think makes it work? How do you think the Oilers free up the salary in order for things to figure themselves out here? There's a lot of questions, very little answers. I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.